Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julie Stoner, and on behalf of the Friends of the Montana Historical Society, I would like to welcome you to today's program, Cowboy Stories and Songs, presented by Phil Page. I would also like to add that this lecture series is our only yearly fundraiser, providing grant money to the various MHS departments for items not allocated for by the state budget. For example, the strollers at the entrance to the MHS. So thank you very much for your support. Also, could you please silence your phones? Thank you. Phil Page has been making a living on horseback since 1976, cowboying on some of the biggest ranches and pack outfits in the lower 48. He has also been a professional horse trainer, saddle maker, and horseshoer. At this time, can you please welcome Phil Page?
We need to add my wife Debbie to that too. Don't want to get bucked off in front of the whole crew this morning. I did that once, you know. I was working for the Selkirk Ranch down in Dillon. Anybody ever read the book We Pointed 'Em North by Teddy Blue Abbott? Do you know how he got his name? He was over in Milestown, Montana, wasn't he? Back before they called it Miles City. And he got to town one night and got to drinking a little bit, ended up on stage, and instead of running off stage, he jumped on a bar stool, and he made it buck across the, made it buck across the stage, and he was hollering, "Ho Blue." And that's how he got his name, Teddy Blue Abbott. Well, as mentioned, we cowboyed on some of the big outfits down south. I think it was an opportunity to step back in time, if a person could, in the 20th century. Back in the 70s and 80s, we worked on some of those big outfits where we pulled a wagon out. We pulled it out with a truck, but we lived in range teepees, trailed our horses. And I'll never forget when I went to work on the YP Ranch. The first morning, they run in over 100 head of saddle horses. It was 10 of us riding, 10 horses per cowboy. And like I said, it was like stepping back in time. But this is a real privilege for me to be able to play here today. I haven't been playing in front of people all that much. The last couple of years, I've played in little places like Bannock and Virginia City. Me and Debbie lived down in Dillon on the Bannock Stage Road, about 8 miles from Bannock. I must be picking up that other speaker now, too. I'm sounding pretty loud, am I? When we think about the Charlie Russell Museum here, or the Montana's the Historical Society, Charlie Russell's always been a favorite of mine. Now you can't hear me at all. Okay. Test one. That a little better? I'm going to get front-footed here. But I don't think there's one of us here today that haven't thought back, what would it have been like to go up the Missouri River with the Lewis and Clark Party? 50 million buffaloes, some are estimating, from Mexico to Canada, all the way back to Kentucky. And Charlie Russell paints the iconic picture, "When the land belonged to God." And when we look at that picture, doesn't it just make us dream about the days that have gone by. Yeah. And we think about the Lewis and Clark Party, how they continued up the river. They made the right decision at the Marias and continued up the Missouri. They came to Great Falls. The mountain men called it White Bear Falls. There were so many silver-tipped grizzly bears feeding on dead buffalo that had floated down the river, probably from the Bozeman area. Now, talking to one of the old cow bosses for the Flying D, like he said, we worked for him at the Selkirks, but he used to be the cow boss on the Flying D. He said the grass in that country was 3 times better than the grass in Dillon. And that's why probably all the Native Americans went to the Three Forks area to hunt buffalo. Then we think of that little Shoshone gal that was on the expedition, Sacagawea. And she was pointing the way, wasn't she? Because once she got to Three Forks, she had her bearings. See, from the time a Native American was very young, it didn't matter if the stream was 6 inches wide or 100 yards wide, you knew where the water was flowing. That was the key to navigating the Rocky Mountains, is today for a lot of guides. And then we think of when they came into the Dillon area. I'm very passionate about that because we cowboyed in all that Horse Prairie area. But I can't help but think about what kind of feelings that gal had when Lewis came back with the Shoshone Indians. They came back with the chief of the Shoshone. Remember that one? Camelway. And it was Sacagawea's brother. Can you imagine the feelings in her heart? She has to be just beside herself. And the story goes on. We know they went, they got horses from the Shoshone Indians. They went over, hit the Lemhi River, down to the main salmon, down to where the North Fork comes in. They figured they couldn't get down the main salmon, so they went over Lost Trail Pass. We still don't know how they got over that one. And they came down into the East Fork of the Bitterroot. And Charlie Russell paints another masterpiece, Ross's Hole. Yeah. And why did he call it Ross's Hole? That's a whole nother history subject, isn't it? Alexander Ross. He was there in 1824. He had a trapping expedition that circled all down through, well, he came over into the Big Hole to Grasshopper, dropped back over, scouted all the country and trapped beaver all the way to Salmon, Chalice, Stanley, all the way on the south side of the mountains there. Then, of course, we go into the Mountain Man era, and we hear that name John Coulter. Of course, he was on the Lewis and Clark Party, and a guy named George Druard. Yeah, when nobody could produce meat, George did. And then we think that Mountain Man era, and the reason I'm doing this, I like to lead up, I really like cowboy music, but I think it's important to know how it all fit together. 1838, they were bringing steamboats all the way to the confluence of the Yellowstone, and they put in a Fort Union, and pretty soon they were shipping thousands of buffalo hides back down the river. And to the south of us, 300 miles, what was happening about that same time period, 1838? The Oregon Trail. In the next 30 years, from 38 to 68, 500,000 people took to that trail. Sadly, when they started up the Missouri River, they brought a disease with them. They brought smallpox. And on the Oregon Trail, they brought disease also that killed buffalo. And to this day, buffalo are very susceptible to a pneumonia that tips them over. But then another disease happened in 1849, and that was the turning point. Remember what that disease was? Gold fever. That's exactly right. Gold fever, and that's what happened. They came by the thousands. They struck gold on the American River in 49. They struck gold in Bannock in 62. The town went from 2 or 3 people, 4 people, to 3,000. Then they struck gold in Virginia City. The population jumped to 10,000 there. Of course, here in Last Chance Gulch, the population in Montana was exploding, and the market hunters had exhausted the wildlife, and so they needed beef. So a man named Nelson Story, who started a ranch down by Livingston, we feel that he's the one that named Paradise Valley, one of the founding fathers of Bozeman, but those cattle made him a wealthy man. That's where my music kind of comes in. This song was written about the time that Charlie Russell came to the country, about 1880. But a lot of people, I never liked this song because it was always sang as a fairy tale. But there's nothing fairy tale about it. It was written by a real working cowboy that come out of Texas, and the cattle went to Browning, Montana, to the Indian reservation. The buffalo were gone. And of course, we know that reservation up there started in the 1850s. So things were happening in Montana. Let me see if I can get in the right key. What did Will Rogers say? Never miss an opportunity to shut up. You can help me sing this. I was walking one morning for pleasure. I spied a cowpuncher, and he was riding along. His hat was thrown back, his spurs was a jingling, and as he approached me, he was singing this song. And whoop-ki-yi-oh, get along, little doggies, it's your misfortune, it ain't none of my own. And whoop-ki-yi-oh, get along, little doggies, you know that Montana is gonna be your new home. Some of the boys go up the trail for pleasure. Hey, that's where they get it most awfully wrong. For they no idea the trouble that they give us as we go a-trailing them doggies along. And whoop-ki-yi-oh, get along, little doggies, it's your misfortune, it ain't none of my own. Whoop-ki-yi-oh, get along, little doggies, you know that Montana is gonna be your new home. Said, oh, you'll be soup for Uncle Sam's engines, it's beef, we eat beef, I hear 'em cry. Get along, get along, get along, little doggies, 'cause you're gonna be beef steers by and by. You can help me. And whoop-ki-yi-oh, get along, little doggies, it's your misfortune, it ain't none of my own. Whoop-ki-yi-oh, and get along, little doggies, you know that Montana is gonna be your new home. Yeah, you know that Montana is gonna be your new home. Thank you. Can you believe that? Written in late 1870s. Yeah. I hope that song makes more sense. I always heard it as a fairy tale. I believe when the cowboy was calling them little doggies, he was mocking the danger, because everything about those cattle, when they gathered those cattle in Texas, you got to remember, this is after the Civil War. 1866 is when Nelson's Story went down. But some of these other herds coming north, Remember what was happening right in 1866? 600,000 to 700,000 young men are dead in the Civil War, and double that many are maimed, wounded for life. And so the cowboys that they got many times were young. These were 15, 16, 17-year-old kids that had cowboyed and kept track of their parents' cattle, and yet, so when they started bringing these cattle north, they needed help. Well, guess what? Most of the young men were dead, sadly. So, I normally do not quote Hollywood, but one movie that you've probably seen is Lonesome Dove. This is a spin-off from Lonesome Dove. I loved the way Don Edwards, which sadly Don passed away Monday, and he was a cowboy troubadour for sure. And I loved his music, and I loved his storytelling. So this is the song that Don Edwards did, and it's called Goodbye to Montana, and it's a spin-off from the movie Lonesome Dove, where Carl takes his good friend Gus back to Texas to bury him. And I better get in the right. This is why I have glasses, so I can see my notes. I hate these things. Oh, there we go. I got it now. Up before the sunrise, it's a rocky road back home. See, the dust won't near be settled, as it's just where we came from. I'll keep my promise to you, just like I said I would, and lay you 'neath the pecan trees and hang your spurs for good. Say goodbye to Montana, where the northerns always blow. The paintbrush will be blooming by the time I get you home. We drove a herd from Texas to the big Montana sky. Oh, I swear some days I wonder if we'd make it here alive. I wish I could have told you that you were my best friend. Oh, I guess you always knew that, and we were both too tough to bend. Say goodbye to Montana, where the northern always blow. Paintbrush will be blooming by the time I get you home. All honor to the cowboy, praises to him, let's say. He never sold his saddle, that's the most important thing. Adios to old Montana, where the northerns always blow. The paintbrush will be blooming by the time I get you home, my friend. Camaraderie. Thank you. Thank you. Boy, Don Edwards did just a wonderful job playing that tune. We think about coming north with those cattle. Like I said, Teddy Blue, he wrote the book. We pointed them north, and we think that's simple, right? Just go out and get in the car and look on GPS, yeah, that's it, and it tells you which way north is. Do you know what they did back there in Texas and other places when they were trailing cattle north? The last thing the cook would do, he'd take the tongue of the wagon, and if he could see the stars, he'd point it at the North Star. Because if it was raining, it didn't matter. They couldn't take the day off. The cattle are wild. They got to move them every day. In the beginning, they probably moved them 15, 20 miles a day. And then as they got trail broke, and sometimes they'd throw an oxen in there to help them pick up the lead, they would trail them every day, and sometimes they couldn't tell which way north was, if it was all fogged in. But they at least had a direction if the cook could see the North Star the night before. And one of the most dangerous things about coming north with the cattle, with a herd of cattle, was river crossings. A lot of the cowboys couldn't swim. They were solely dependent on their saddle horses. And you can bet when they got close to a big swift river, they run them horses up in a round pen, or not, a rope corral, and they caught out their best swimming horses because their lives depended on those horses. Now, many times Hollywood makes you believe that when cowboys are trailing cattle, they're screaming and hollering and thrashing around like a bunch of idiots. That isn't true. What they would do is the lead men, the trail boss and the lead-off men would come in, and maybe they'd say one word to the cattle, because these are wild cattle that could be spooked. They might have one word that they said every day. They might go, whoop, and that would be it. And that'd stand them up. Maybe that old lead steer would pick up the lead, and they'd start stringing them out. And they'd like them to string out as long, never the drag would be any wider than the lead. It was extremely important to let the cattle walk at their speed. See, a cow walks about 2.5 miles an hour. A horse can walk 3.5 miles an hour. So you got to be patient and let them walk at their speed. This is another Don Edwards tune that I really like because it paints kind of an interesting picture of what life was like. Because as we watch movies and whatnot, we think cowboys were in town every night, and that's just not true. There was hundreds of miles in between where they started from and where they ended. Whether they were going to Abilene or whether they were going on the Goodnight and Loving trail to Fort Sumter onto denver. Called Pushing Horns. Pushing horns weren't easy like the movies says it was. Oh, I don't remember dance hall girls and hotel rooms with rugs. We worked hot and tired and nasty, rode our ponies heads too low. And all the nights when you couldn't sleep 'cause it was too damn cold, and we'd sing Strawberry Roan and Little Joe. Like the time we hit the river and the rain began to fall, water's rising so darn fast I thought it'd drown us all. Oh, we lost a lot of steers that day and 4 or 5 good mounts, but when all the boys rode into camp, we know that's what counts, and we'd sing whoop-ki-yay and get along. For the night they broke behind us and they took us by surprise. Oh, I whistled out to Bonner, I saw the terror in his eyes. Oh, he rode for all his horse could ride, and I know he'd done his best. He crossed over Jordan, riding Dunny to his death, and we'd sing cowboy laments all night long. So when you see a cowboy, he's not bragging by his choice. No, he never meant to bow those legs or put that gravel in his voice. Just chasing what he really loves, what's burning in his soul. Wishing to hell that he'd been born 100 years ago. Still singing Strawberry Roan and Little Joe. We're still singing Strawberry Roan and Little Joe. Thank you. I think something fell out of tune here. Maybe it was my voice. I wrote a few cowboy songs this last year, and this is one that I call 1800s, and it is a spin-off from Charles Goodnight and Oliver Loving. Charles Goodnight and Oliver Loving were really some of the first men that had figured out if we can gather some of these wild feral cattle up in Texas. These are wild cattle, dangerous cattle, longhorn cattle. If we can get them gathered up and trail them to places like Fort Sumter, New Mexico, we can take a $1 cow and turn that cow into a $35 cow. This is after the Civil War. This is a fortune. Can you imagine 1,500 head of cattle or 2,000 head of cattle? Let's see if I did the math on that, which I'm not going to, but anyhow, it was a lot of money in those days, wasn't it? But in the movie Lonesome Dove, remember where Cole takes his good friend Gus back to Texas? See, that's a real historical account. Charles Goodnight and Oliver Loving, they gathered a big bunch of cattle and they had a contract to deliver those cattle to Fort Sumter. On the way, they skirted the Comanche country. We know the Blackfeet have a reputation, don't they? It's being fierce. The Comanche were every bit as so, or even more, they say. So they were trying to get away from the Comanche nation. Well, they were running late. So Oliver Loving went ahead, and sadly, he got into a little skirmish with a band of Comanche Indians. He got wounded in the wrist, just like in the movie, I guess, or similar. He did make it into Fort Sumter, but he got gangrene in his arm. They took his arm off, but it was too late. Charles Goodnight, he figured out he came, the one man made it back to the herd and told him what was going on, and Charles Goodnight made his way, he found where they had been in this little fight, and he went to Fort Sumter and he found Oliver Loving, and Oliver Loving's last request was, please take me back to Texas and bury me. And you see, that was 600 miles in a wagon before they could preserve the body, and he did that for him. But everything about that trip, as I mentioned, coming north was a wild trip. Like that first song I sang, Get Along Little Doggies, the second verse says, some of the boys go up the trail for pleasure. Well, that's where they get it most awfully wrong. See, and a lot of those kids that came on those first trail drives, they were looking for adventure. They wanted, just like many of us when we were young, we were always looking for adventure, weren't we? The wilder, the better. Anyhow, this song's called 1800s. Hope you like it. I'm getting in trouble here. There we go. It's in the 1800s, Goodnight and Loving, they're the legends or cowboy dreams. We pointed 'em north, strike a lead, string 'em out, let 'em walk on. they please. Our ponies were fresh, the country was wild, and 2,000 miles was a lot for a child. But the trail boss was fair, and he knew what he had with teenage cowboys in a land that was bad. We were green, oh, we were living the dream. Oh, rivers were swift, those mountains got high. We kept punching those beasts toward the big sky. And old Jake, now he told us where the grass was good in old Montana, where he had once stood. So we kept it on up for 30 more days until we came across, oh, this paradise place where the water was rich, the cover was fine. We all agreed, oh, it must be divine. And it was green. Oh, we were living the dream. Oh, oh, letting those coyotes sing. Oh, we're living the dream. In the 1800s, that Goodnight and Loving, they're the legends of our cowboy dream. Thank you. I believe when Charlie Russell, of course, Charlie Russell had such a reputation of being an artist. He not only could paint, and he was a sculptor, but he could tell stories. And there's a painting, or one of the paintings is Laugh Kills Lonesome. And you can see what Charlie Russell's doing in that painting. That's him on the right. And he's telling a wild, wild story of something that happened that might have been quite humorous. A lot of the cowboys are laughing. And it's true. Sometimes you're sitting out there on a wagon and you're wondering, what am I doing here? Everybody else is living a life, but once you start making a living horseback, they really should vaccinate for that, because once you get hooked on that, that's all you want to do. Charlie Russell, he said, wouldn't you like to get a good horse under you, ride over some real grass country, get down on your belly and drink from a high mountain stream? There's a man that appreciated the creation. He loved the lifestyle. He was hooked, wasn't he? And he loved that lifestyle. And he shows us through his art. He shows us through his storytelling. And I thought it was interesting that I was reading the book, Trails Plowed Under. I'd read it a long time ago, but I started reading it again, because Charlie talks about himself in the beginning. And I feel like some of the historians give Charlie a little bit of a black eye because of what he said about himself. Now, you got to remember something. Cowboys never, ever bragged on themselves. You showed what you could do. If you were handy with a rope, throwing that hula hand, or a backhand, or an overhand, you showed people how good you were. If you were good at riding broncs, you showed people that you could ride a bronc. You didn't tell people you could ride one. You went out and you showed it. And so when Charlie wrote them words about himself, remember he said, don't quote me, something similar to this. He said he was never a great cowboy in some people's eyes, basically. He said he couldn't really ride that good. Well, of course he could ride well, but he couldn't ride broncs very good. See, a lot of good cowboys are great cowboys, but they're not good bronc riders. Maybe Charlie wasn't a great bronc rider, and that's why they had bronc stompers that would sometimes top your horse for you early in the morning. If you had a really bad one that you had to ride that day, you'd sometimes get one of the young guys to step on him and top him off for you. He said he wasn't a good roper. Of course he could rope, but maybe he couldn't throw those big fancy hula hands or big fancy backhands or those hip shots. He said he was just a night wrangler, just a Nighthawk that took care of the horses at night. How many of here have rode all night when it's so pitch black you can't see the fire on the end of your cigarette? And you're chasing horses around, trying to keep track of, see, a lot of those outfits had 15 cowboys. And on a good outfit, you'd have at least 8 horses per cowboy. So he'd have 100, 150 head of saddle horses, plus the teams, and he had to keep them together all night long. Now, on a moonlight night with it 60 degrees, yahoo, what a great duty that would be. But see, a lot of nights, it's so black that he can't see his hand in front of his face. So I got a story to tell about a horse that I had that will clarify how Charlie got some of this stuff done. Anyhow, this song is a song I wrote. It's called Before Broncs Went to Town. And you got to remember that rodeos, I don't know if all of us kind of like going to a rodeo from time to time, but you see, rodeos started really from the Roundup, if we could have that picture of the Roundup, because there's so many things happening on a Roundup that you take for granted. I bet thousands of people have walked by this painting right here and not thought about all that went into this, what was going through Charlie Russell's mind when he painted it. Now, this is before barbed wire. So maybe there's 3 or 4 different ranches that are gathering cattle in their area within a 15 miles of the roe deer. Now, down south, we don't call them roundups. Down in Nevada and Oregon, they're called roe deers, just so you understand the word when I use it. But a roundup, you can see all the cattle in the background. There might be 2,000 to 3,000 head of cattle there. There could be 60 cowboys, 15 cowboys from each ranch could be here. See, that's why they're cutting cattle. And now some of the cowboys from, say, the P.O. ranch, they're branding here in this bunch. They're holding herd. The other 6 or 8 cowboys are holding herd out there while the cow boss, the jigger boss are making the cuts. And they're cutting certain brands this way. And then they'll cut, say, the quarter circle twos are going to go back up the Big Hole River. The P.O.s are going back up the Beaverhead River. The Dragon Wise are going up the Ruby River, say if you're over in the Twin Bridges area, and then maybe another bar double T is going back down the Jefferson. So that's what's going on in this picture. And you've got at these big roundups, this is a place you show off a little bit. This is a place you get to show other cowboys that you can ride a bronc, or that you can throw those fancy loops, or that you can read cattle, or you can build a bridle horse, build a beautiful cutting horse. All the different talents come out, and everybody had different talents. Now, one of these roundups in the Judith Basin, Charlie was responsible for 400 head of horses. Think of that at night. That man was a lot handier than we read from that book, but that's just cowboy humility. You see, he was humble about himself, and so he said, I'll let you guys figure out what kind of a hand you think I am. Like I said, maybe he wasn't a bronc stomper, maybe he wasn't the best roper, but he could rope. He also got sent out. You'll hear this word. He was a rep. You hear that word? When you look into the history, do you know what that is? He represented maybe one of the ranches, but he was like a modern day brand inspector. He made sure the correct brand went, when these guys are branding these calves, he's making sure that if that cow's packing a PO brand, Poindexter ore, that came to Dillon years ago, the Matador today, that he made sure that that's what went on that calf. So he had positions of very high responsibility. So I thought that, his humble attitude keep a lot of historians guessing as far as what kind of a hand he was. He was a lot better than he let on. I call this song Before Bronx Went to Town because a lot of people go to rodeos and they have no idea where it came from. The outside circle was 100 miles around. Four big outfits throwing cattle to the road deer grounds. Yeah, how soon we all forget how things used to be. It's on the northern range in the 1870s. Well, you could see it unfold before your eyes on the line. 3,000 head of cattle and 50 top hands. Good horses, bronc rides, and the best gear that you'll ever see. It's on the open range when a cowboy's life was free. And it's all before Bronx went to town. Billy'd come north with a herd just late last fall. Building them old bridle horses, don't he beat all? And old Hank, he could throw that grass rope as far as the sea. With a backhand, yeah, he could pick up 2 hind feet. And it's all before Bronx went to town. Well, how soon we all forget how things used to be. It's on the northern range where the cowboy's life was free. And it's all before Bronx went to town. Yep. Thank you. Hopefully that shed a little bit of light on that subject. I did write a song about Charlie Russell. We can't leave him out, can we? We got a nice picture of Charlie Russell right there. And I call this song Nighthawk. I've explained a lot about this song. We know that Charlie Russell came to Montana in 1880, came through Dillon. The railroad, remember, had made it 1869. No wagon trains went west after 69. The railroad had made it. And then a branch, I think it was called the Ogden Short Line, was coming north, heading for Butte to the copper mines. It had made it to Red Rock, south of Dillon. Charlie took the train to Red Rock, and then he was stagecoach from there into Helena, and then he was horseback into the Judith Basin. And what's unique about Charlie Russell when we think about him? We know the first year he herded sheep and he didn't do a good job at all. He didn't like that job. But the second year he spent it with a man named Jake Hoover, who was an old trapper, mountain man, market hunter, hunted for the mines. And Charlie Russell, I can just picture him because I did this myself when I was a kid, or 19 years old. You know, I had a mentor. Old Jack Likens, me and old Brent Jones back there, we worked for old Jack. And we'd sit on a stump around on a pack trip, would be 50 miles from town, and would finally get him to tell us a story or two. And I can just see Charlie picking old Jake Hoover's mind. Tell me what things were like back in the old days. So, and Charlie Russell, what did he say? He said, "There's not enough time in a man's life to paint all the pictures in my mind." He evidently had a photographic memory, and he was an artist in so many ways. He was a storyteller, spinning yarn, they called it. Charlie was Montana's, he made Montana, I guess you'd say, famous in a lot of ways through his art. Anyhow, I'll call this song Nighthawk. He was just a kid when he felt the call. It's in the spring of 1880. He was 16 years old, didn't know it all, and the northern range was fading. Still he took it all in, the back of his mind, of the big road deers and those wild bronc rides, and to the native man and all his ways. You see, a cowboy's life was all he craved. They made him a nighthawk in the northern rain. They made him a nighthawk on the northern range, in the dark of night, in the snow and rain. It was back in the day when a fire was your light, and tending the cabby, oh, them horses meant our lives. So he laid it down for us all to see. He's the gift to old Montana history. Hey, he captured that life with the tip of his brush, of them old-time ways that we miss so much. And just think of the nights out under the stars, where he learned to spin so many yarns. Yes, it takes us back to the days gone by, where it's only us cowboys who can keep it alive. made him a Nighthawk on northern range. They made him a Nighthawk on the northern range. Moonlight nights, starry gaze. It was back in the day when a fire was your light and tending the horses. Oh yeah, they meant our lives. They made him a Nighthawk. Thank you. I hope Charlie would appreciate that. Should take you back 100 years. Kind of paints a picture of cowboy attitude as far as a lifestyle. Wasn't about the money. Wasn't about the glory. A lot of cowboys made good bronc rides that nobody ever saw. They threw the fanciest loops you can imagine. Nobody ever saw it, but they saw it. They built beautiful horses, bridle horses, hackamore horses. And if you were fortunate enough to work for that outfit, you can tell when you get cut a string of horses who did a nice job training and building a horse that you got to ride. I think this old song was written by Stan Jones. Any relation? I love this old song. I'm lonesome but happy, rich but I'm broke, and the good Lord knows the reason I'm just a cowpoke. From Cheyenne to Douglas, all the ranges I know. When I drift with the wind, no one cares where I go. No, I ain't got a dime in these wore-out old jeans, so I'll stop eating steak and I'll go back to beans. Oh, I'll pick up a 10-spot and Prescott, I know, when I'm riding the broncs in the big rodeo. Some evening in the springtime, a filly I'll find, and I might spend all summer with her on my mind. But I'll never be branded, I'll never be broke. I'm a carefree range riding, I'm a drifting cowpoke. You can help me on this if you want. Thank you. Hard to write them like that. Let's see. We got time for, we got time for a couple, maybe 2 or 3 more. What do we got here? Okay. I like this old ballad because we think of cowboys like Charlie Russell. And last year, had a good old friend. His name was Charlie Honkamp. And Charlie Honkamp passed. Do you know Charlie? Yeah. We worked together. We cowboyed together for the Hagenbarth Ranch out of Glen. I got to tell you this story because, like the picture, like there, laugh kills lonesome. This is a story we got lots of laughs out of. So we were working for the old Hagenbarth Ranch down there, and me and my wife used to shoe horses, and we rode colts, and we'd day work, and so we were working with old Charlie Honkamp. And also we would shoe horses. So we used to shoe his horses for him, and he came to work on one Friday and says, I got to go pick up bucking horses in Missoula, so I need you to shoe my horses for me. And I said, I can't get to him. I'm tied up, I got horses I got to go shoe. And he says, well, maybe I can get a guy to shoe this old gelding for me over in Missoula. But to start out with, every day we'd gone to $50 per horse to shoe horses. We'd gone from 45 up to 50. So Charlie would come to work, and the first thing he'd say to us was, you charge too much to shoe my horses now. I mean, he'd just jokingly always saying that every day. That's how the morning started. We'd just come in and wouldn't say good morning, just, you charge too much shoe horses. And I said, Charlie, $50 is the going rate. So Monday morning comes, I see right off he's got new shoes on his horse, but I don't say nothing. So we go move a big bunch of yearlings, and we get them moved, and it's raining that day, kind of thundering and lightning and stuff, and we get these yearlings moved, and we're kind of jogging back over to a set of corrals. And so I'm jogging along, so I said, Charlie, what'd that boy in Missoula charge you to shoe that horse? He says, $45. And lightning strikes right beside of us, and thunder goes off, and he starts screaming, $50, $50. That's a true cowboy story right there, and it actually happened. So I seen Charlie about 2 weeks before he passed away, and we laughed about that story even then. It was a good one. But I think of one of the things that cowboys never want to know is the last time they'll ever get to ride a horse. So this song's kind of a ballad. I really don't play a lot in it, but it's called Make Me a Cowboy Again for a Day. Backward, turn backwards, old time with your wheels. Bicycles, wagons, and automobiles. Dress me again in a big Stetson hat. Spurs, flannel shirts, slicker and chaps. And put a 6-shooter or 2 in my hand. Show me a yearling to rope and to brand. And out where the sage is dusty and gray, make me a cowboy again for a day. Give me a bronco that knows how to dance, blue roan in color and wicked of glance, new to the feeling of bridle and bit. Give me a quirt that'll sting when it hits. Strap on a blanket behind in a roll. Toss me a lariat dear to my soul. And over the trails let me gallop away. And make me a cowboy again for a day. Thunder of hooves on the ranges we ride. Hissing of iron, sizzling of hide. Bellow of cattle and the snort of cayuse. Longhorns of Dillon as wild as the deuce. And midnight stampedes, milling of herds. Yells of the cowboys too angry for words. And right in the midst of it all, let me say, make me a cowboy again for a day. One more verse. Under the star-studded sky so vast, campfire and coffee and comfort at last, and bacon that sizzles and crisp in the pan. And after the Roundup smells good to a man. Stories of cowboys and outlaws retold. And over the pipes as these embers grow cold. Now these are the tunes that old memories play. Help me out. Make me a cowboy again for a day. Thank you. Was a cowboy I knew in Montana. His face was burned deep by the sun. Part history, part sage, and part mesquite. He was there when Pancho Villa was young, and he'd tell us some tales of the old days when the country was wild all around. We'd sit out under the stars of the Milky Way and would listen as them coyotes howl. They go. Comanches are gone, and the outlaws are gone. Geronimo's gone, and old Bass Reeves is gone, and the Red Wolf is gone, and the buffalo are gone. Oh, he cursed all the roads and the old men, and he'd curse the automobile, and he'd say there's no place for an hombre like I am in your new world of asphalt and steel. And then he'd look off someplace in the distance That's something only could see. And he'd say, all that's left now of them old days are them damned old coyotes and me. And they'd go, you'd help me. Now the longhorns are gone, and the drovers are gone, Comanches are gone, and them outlaws are gone, old Coulter's gone, and old Russell, he's gone, and the big sheep are gone, and the buffalo are gone. One morning we searched his old cabin. He disappeared without even a word. But that night when the moon crossed the mountain, one more coyote was heard, and he'd go. That's for Dawn Edwards. Thank you. Thank you, that means a lot. Do we have time for one more? One more. Okay. Sorry. I know the song, I just can't remember what key I played it in. Okay, there we go. I call this one Scattering the Riders, and that's the name of that painting that Charlie Russell did right there. Just to explain just a little bit for just a minute. This is really, he devoted a lot of time to this painting. And I think, again, people don't understand what's happening. The cow boss takes the lead, and he comes out. All the cowboys are with him, maybe 15 cowboys. And he knows what you're riding for horses. He knows the horse scabby. And a lot of the young guys that can ride broncs, they're on some of the bigger, wilder kind of horses that maybe want to buck a little bit. Well, guess who gets the outside circle? Yeah, and they want it because they want some country to cover for those kind of horses. So he knows what's going on, and he systematically starts scattering the riders. Your outside man, he starts kicking cattle to the next man. He kicks the cattle on down and so forth, and they make a big sweep, maybe in a drainage. And scattering the riders, that's what the cow boss is doing. We're all going to meet at a certain Roundup grounds. And when I put you in a position, if you've got the outside, you better be coming back on your position. Nobody mixes, or if you get put out there in a position, that's where you stay. If you get inside of somebody else's ground, that's an insult to the other cowboy. That's saying you can't hold up your end of the bargain. So it's very important to be polite with one another. It's a very systematic way of gathering cattle. So I really can appreciate the art that he put into that. It's called us Scattering the Riders. We saddle for daybreak, it's a cow boss's call. We put a gather on Sage Creek is pushing another fall. As he scatters us riders, old paint's a little tight. The outside will fit him just right, and we'll ride that big sea of sage, yeah, let's ride. Hey, we'll ride that big range again, where the cattle are wild, the horses ain't tame, but we like it that way. Oh, we can't get enough to see a cowboy's life, bound to be rough. Oh, let's ride that big sage again. Years roll by like a morning mist, and our minds drift back to the days when we lived. A Holt saddle, good horses, and the stars up above. A life most only dream of. Hey, let's ride that big sea of sage, yeah, let's ride. Hey, we'll ride that big range again, where the cattle are wild, the horses ain't tame, but we like it that way. Oh, we can't get enough. See a cowboy's life, it's bound to be rough, so we ride that big sage again. Hey, let's ride that big range again, where the cattle are wild, the horses ain't tame. We like it that way. Oh, we can't get enough. A cowboy's life is bound to be rough. Hey, let's ride that big sage again. Hey, let's ride. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out today. Means a lot. It really means a lot. Thank you for coming out. Want to let you know too, I got a CD made. And now we couldn't decide whether to make an 8-track or a cassette. We went ahead with a CD, but if anybody would like one, we might get some gas money going home, huh? Yeah. No whiskey money though.
Thank you, Phil.
You're welcome. Thank you.